How would you feel if Jacob? There you go. Thank you. I was like, who's Jacob? How would you feel if Jacob, no offense to you, sorry, draws a document that says the Virgin Mary is not a virgin, and let's sign here. If I sign that paper, would you go to my mass? Would you think I'm a heretic? Yes, because I'm putting my name on it. I'm accepting it, right? That's exactly the case with Vatican II. It's a document that contains blatant heresy, and anyone that comes and accepts that is a heretic, just by that. The Ten Commandments. With the Ten Commandments, again, we can look at all the abuses that have happened and all the theft that has been going on and all that different stuff. We don't need to go into any of that. They can say, if I go and say, well, Leo the 14th, had this history of accepting priests that did this and that. Not necessary to go there. We don't need to go there. That's personal stuff. There's always been like that in the church, sins that popes and bishops and people have committed. Systematically, does Vatican II have anything against the Ten Commandments? What's the first commandment? What is it? Guess. Thou shalt have no strange gods before me. Thou shalt have no strange gods before me. This is where we get into ecumenism, communication sacris, all that stuff. Vatican II systematically teaches to break the first commandment. It tells you, go into your Hindu, whatever it is, and worship with them. Go with the Lutheran guys and worship with them. Grab the Pachamama, worship with them. It's crazy what this guy was saying, that it was a representation of our Blessed Mother. Which is incredibly blasphemous. The Pachamama is a immodest idol. I can't go into details. That is, yes, and also like the original idol is supposed to be feeding an animal and a baby. So it's like, okay, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Vatican II and the hierarchy after Vatican II systematically teaches to break the most important commandment of all. That's something that we tend to miss. We say sometimes, well, isn't killing worse? Or, maybe the sixth commandment worse because it leads the most souls to hell? No, the commandments actually go from the most important, they're all important, but it goes from the most serious to the least. That's why it starts with, thou shalt have no strange gods before me, and it ends with your thoughts of, thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife, neighbor's good. So breaking the first commandment is the most important of all. What did our Lord say when they asked him, what is the most important commandment? What did he say? That's the first commandment. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. So when Vatican II breaks the first commandment, systematically it teaches you to do it. That's enough to say it's wrong, totally perverted when it comes to morals. I don't need to go into the rest. With one that is broken and the most important one, that's enough. The one video I wanted to show you, and I think I might have shown it to you guys before. When Francis first came into office, he released the video of the Pope, it was called. And the very first video was one about ecumenism. And in the video at the end, did I ever told you that? And I wish I could show it. At the end of the video, you had throughout the video like an Hindu guy and a Muslim guy and a Catholic guy, and then I think a Protestant guy. And at the end of the video, they would show like the baby Jesus, and then another hand would put Buddha, and then another hand would put the Muslim rosary, and another hand would put the Jewish menorah. The Jewish guy was the other one. And I showed that to a couple of the people I was talking to. And they said to me, well, he's trying to have dialogue. And I told, fair enough. I said, okay, first of all, let's be clear. What should a Catholic priest or a Catholic hierarch say about dialogue with false religions? There is no dialogue with false religions. I go there to convert you out of that wickedness and darkness. That is the dialogue I should have with a false religion. Yes, I go there to tell you that that is evil, it's wicked. A false religion is wicked. Even if it's Protestantism and they are Christians and they don't believe in just one thing, it's a wicked religion because it goes against God. That doesn't mean that everyone there is wicked. Maybe there are people that are in good faith that we need to convert, but the teaching itself is bad. Does that make sense? Now, what I told these people is this, okay, you're telling me that, fair enough. I challenge you to do it, which is maybe a bad thing to say. Go and take your crucifix in your room, and I want you to put a Buddha next to your crucifix, and then put also a Hindu figure, Shiva, next to your crucifix, and you tell your children to go in there and pray to the crucifix. Let's see if you do it. And every time that I talk about it, I get goosebumps because it's a monstrous idea to put demons next to our Lord and to pretend that we can all worship there. That cannot be. A great example of this was also Assisi. Yeah. In Assisi, John Paul II was the first one that did it. And the argument that they will tell you is, well, but John Paul II told them that, God bless you, that they could go worship in their rooms. You know, he didn't want them to all worship like together or anything. There was no communication sacraments because he said, you know, you can go worship in your rooms and then we'll all get together, which is not true. When you see the video, everybody's praying in a big thing. But let's grant that. Let's say that you say, okay, they're going to worship in your rooms. That would still be evil. It would still be evil that I facilitate for you a place to sin. Does that make sense?
And you're summoning a demon into ostensibly the place where God is to be worshipped.
Yeah. But it's just like this. Here's a very easy example that we put there, and I can be specific, you know, but let's say that I have a couple people that are into debauchery, like rainbow stuff, and I tell them, hey, here's that room. I'm not doing it. We're not doing it. I mean, it's not like we're all in front. Here's your room. You're doing it in private. You would say to me, Father, that's scandalous. You're promoting sin. Of course, that is not as bad. Remember what I said. That's not as bad as breaking the first commandment. Breaking the first commandment is worse than that. And so by doing that, John Paul II did a very evil thing. Yes.
And also on that point, with Moses, when all of the Israelites, they were worshiping the golden calf, and they weren't right next to God, they were outside, you know, and then Moses comes out and sees what they're doing. And then God commands for him to slay like 23,000. That's like the direct comparison to say that that's how God views that command. Right?
Idolatry.
So saying, oh yeah, you're okay. You know, they did it outside. They didn't know.
Yeah.
You know, but they were in a room privately, and something like that.
And also, there is a video where John Paul II allowed them to put Buddha on top of a tabernacle and to worship on that tabernacle, and the church got destroyed by God. That is the sanctuary. What was I going to say on that line? They might say, well, that's the Old Testament, though. You know, the New Testament is all charity and love. I would encourage you going back to the Old Testament. Have you ever read the second book of Maccabees? That is amazing when you read that. It's like you have an old man, Eleazar, I think you say it. Yeah, thank you. And they were telling him not even to go worship an idol. It was just eat pork. And they told him, we'll give you something else that is not pork. You know, just simulate that you're eating pork. And he was willing to suffer the most gruesome death just to not give the impression that he was committing idolatry. And not even idolatry, apostasy, that was all that it was. And all that was. And he wouldn't do it. But let's go to the New Testament. Look at all the saints, their missionaries in Germany, the missionaries in Britain, the missionaries here in Mexico. The first thing that they would do is destroy the idol to the risk of their lives. All of them were risking their lives because they would go in there and have the whole crowds next to them. And it's like, who was the one that chopped off the tree? St. Boniface. It's like, when you think that's the guts to do that, because you have a bunch of Vikings, all of you next to you, and you're
we're gonna kill you if you do that, and then one swing in front of everybody.
Yeah, and the same thing with the Spaniards in Mexico. Spaniards in Mexico, I mean, they when you read the stories, I hope I'm not going too long. The Hernan Cortez, they would saw the pikes with skulls, human skulls of all their enemies in the entrance to the temple. And with that, they had the guts to go on there. Boom, down goes the idol with the priests in there. And many of them were killed. And so when you have the Pope telling me, we have to go have dialogue with these people, it's like, no, you go to convert them. And you tell them right away, that's an evil, that's wrong. Okay, not to go too much into this, but just one last thing. This is a good example when you're talking about this. If someone has cancer, Jacob, you have cancer. And there is a doctor that is telling him, hey, this is how you get better. You know, you got to do this and this and that. And there is 9 people that are telling him lies and are telling him things that are going to kill him. Would you say that we have to say, oh, let's have dialogue? You know, listen to all of them. You know, take a little bit of a sip of everyone's, poison, please. Because, no, this is your life at stake. You listen to the one that has the truth. And if I know that the other ones are lying, I have a serious duty to go and say, these guys are lying, right? You're liking this, I know. But it's true, right? That's what we do. So if that applies with medicine, it applies with engineering, with building, it applies with the army, it applies with all serious matters. How could it not apply when it comes to religion? How could I say that in religion? It doesn't make any sense. Does that make sense so far? Yes.
A while back, a man came to our church, and I went out to meet him, and he was just teaching someone to drive. He used to drive on some reason. But I explained to him, he said, I saw the kids there, and I said, oh, we're Catholic. He said, oh, I'm Catholic, I go to St. Philip's or whatever it is in Tampa. And I said, oh, yeah. And then I said, oh, we just teach the Baltimore Catechism, the Sacraments, the Apostles' Creed, and the Commandments. He said, oh, the Commandments, nobody keeps those anymore. Not one. And he was supposed to be another sort of Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
But right on, nobody ever keeps any of the commandments anymore.
Yeah. And here's, while we're in there, I'll make this point. If someone asks me, like, what is one of the major harms that has been done to souls in Vatican II, I would say that one of the major harms is that they have taught them not to care.
Yeah, that was sad. Yeah.
They have taught them not to care, and that's, again, is going to the root. Because if I teach you an error like you do care, it will be easy for me to change you. If you're a Lutheran that is convinced of the Lutheran faith, whatever, that's not a faith, but if you're convinced of your whatever, but you're firm and strong and you care about the truth, I can go and have a dialogue with you and convert you because you care about the truth and you will be moved. But it's like a car that is moving and I can just move the steering wheel one way or another. I can fight you over it, maybe. I just thought of a cool, like, come on. But if the car is not moving, there's nothing I can do. And that's what Vatican II has done. They have taught them not to care. And at that moment, it's like you talk to them and it's like, oh, you have your truth. I have my truth. How do you argue with that? It's like, you don't even care about the truth. There's nothing I can do to change, which is really the most harmful thing you could do.